The first trucks loaded with medicine, fuel, and gas began entering the Gaza Strip at noon on Friday through the Rafah land crossing as part of the truce agreed with the Israeli state. In Panama, dozens of people remain in vigil in front of the building of the Supreme Court of Justice on a day when the High Court starts a permanent session to decide over the constitutionality of Mining Law 406. And the leader of Niger's ruling military junta council, General Omar Tiani, met on Thursday with his counterparts from Mali and Burkina Faso in his first international visit since he took the presidency in July. Hello, welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. And the first trucks loaded with medicine, fuel, and gas began to enter the Gaza Strip at noon on Friday through the Rafah land crossing. This is part of the aid to be delivered at the beginning of the truce agreed with the Israeli state. According to the Egyptian Al Qira TV News, a first convoy of 60 trucks crossed the border crossing on the first day of the truce. The director of the main information service, Dia Rashwan, who acts as a spokesperson for the Egyptian government, stated on Friday that 130,000 liters of fuel and 4 trucks of gas from Egypt will enter the Gaza Strip daily, as well as 200 trucks of humanitarian aid. In addition, Egypt will continue to receive groups of injured children from Gaza for treatment in the country. In this context, thousands of Gazans returned to their homes from various places where they sought shelter from bombardments. A long caravan of vehicles is moving through the streets of Khan Yunis, one of the main cities in southern Gaza. They are internally displaced people returning to their homes with the few belongings they were able to take with them in an attempt to return to some semblance of normality during this 4-day ceasefire that began on Friday. However, Israeli warplanes flew over southern Gaza, dropping leaflets warning people not to return to the north. And for the first time in weeks, the Palestinian people woke up without the sounds of Israeli war machine, while humanitarian aid was able to enter the Gaza Strip. All this as part of the humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas. With more details, our correspondent Noor Harasin reports directly from the Gaza Strip.
First hours following this truce with Israel, and the situation actually calm on the ground. This is the first morning where we wake up with no sounds of Israeli drones and Israeli warplanes. At the same time, since the very early hours of this morning, Egypt allowed in around 200 trucks of humanitarian aid, including fuel and gas. And this is something that never happened before. I mean, fuel entered twice before here into the Gaza Strip. The first time it was for the UN, and the second time it was for the Al-Itisalat network to help restore the network and landlines connection. However, this is the first time that the fuel enters the Gaza Strip for humanitarian purposes, and also this is the first time that cooking gas, enters the Gaza Strip for 7 weeks now, and will very much help the situation. I'll help restore the situation here in Gaza. Of course, this aid is not gonna fully help the people of Gaza. This is not gonna fully meet the full needs of the people of Gaza, but at least it is something, and is happening while both Israel and Hamas are halting their attacks and their fighting. So that's why it is so significant, because actually the people and the hospitals can take a rest. Now, some people are trying to go back to their homes in northern Gaza. However, the Israeli forces are firing tear gas, stopping these people from going back, and they also thrown leaflets asking the people not to move to the northern Gaza, and that the northern Gaza will stay as a closed battle land. However, they said that only the people in northern Gaza can go and flee actually to southern Gaza. Nur Harazin, TeleSUR, Gaza.
From Lebanon, the Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian warned that the conflict in the region could expand if the temporary humanitarian agreement between Israel and the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas is not maintained. After holding a meeting with the leader of Hezbollah, the Iranian Foreign Minister discussed several scenarios and possible ways to solve the situation in Gaza, just as Israel intensifies ground incursions into the northern Gaza Strip. The head of Iranian diplomacy affirmed that the war is not the solution and urged all influential international actors in the current conflict to take advantage of the truce to present political initiative to stop the genocide in Gaza. And in this context, the parliamentary bloc Loyalty Lebanese Resistance demanded as an immediate measure the suspension of Israel's membership in the United Nations for the crimes perpetrated in Palestine and Lebanon. The group of deputies affirms that the Israeli aggression against Gaza and its people qualifies as genocide, which disturbs public and international process. Therefore, the legislators urged the repeal of the legitimacy of the Tel Aviv regime before the UN in order to free and defend the existence of Palestine. In this context, in Spain, dozens of people continue to march as a demonstration of support for the Palestinian people in the face of the Israeli government aggressions. In the main street of Andalusia, hundreds of people marched in rejection of the attacks perpetrated by the Israeli regime against journalists in the Gaza Strip. The attack had so far left 66 journalists dead among the 14,500 Palestinians killed since the escalation of the siege against the Gaza Strip. The president of the Professional College of Journalists of Andalusia, Teresa Santos, has signaled that she is calling for a stop to the fire against the population in Gaza and the journalists working in the area. And also, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel led a march on Thursday along Havana's iconic Malecón seafront drive in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The parade was called by the Cuban Young Communist League. Havana advocates a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on the creation of two states, which would allow the Palestinian people to exercise the right to self-determination and to have an independent and sovereign state within the pre-1977 borders. In a recent meeting with young Palestinians studying on the island, Miguel Díaz-Canel ratified his country's support for Palestine and condemned in the strongest terms Israel's genocide. And the Palestinian resistance, Hamas, agreed to a humanitarian truce in the Gaza Strip with the occupying Zionist entity for 4 days, a temporary ceasefire that went into effect on Friday morning and which the Palestinians hope will turn into a total and permanent end to the war. See the details in the following report by our correspondent Hisham Wanus.
In addition to halting shelling, military actions, the movement of military vehicles and arrests, the agreement stipulates the exchange of 50 captured Israeli with 150 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails and demands that the occupation troops allow, during the truce period, the free movement of Gaza's neighbors and the entry every day into the Strip of 204 trucks of humanitarian aid, including medical supplies and fuel, an agreement that the Hamas movement affirms seeks to serve the Palestinian people and to reinforce their tenacity in the face of Zionist aggression. Negotiations will continue over the remaining Israeli military hostages in the hands of the resistance, who will not be released before they set free all Palestinian prisoners in the occupation jails. We continue to work to achieve that goal and continue the struggle against the occupation troops that for more than a month and a half have been shelling the Gaza Strip, thinking that they can release their hostages without exchanging them. But they will not succeed. That's why we consider that the agreement reached is a victory of the resistance and of our Palestinian people. Before the expected implementation of this agreement, the Israeli forces intensified their shelling of all the governorates and neighborhoods of Gaza. Despite Arab, regional, and international calls for a complete stop to the attacks, the Israeli Prime Minister and his cabinet promised to resume with much more force after the end of the truce, they claim, in order to put an end to Hamas and release all the hostages.
The Zionist occupation entity, once the truce is over, will return to its war of extermination against our brothers in Gaza, and therefore we consider that the truce is positive in its humanitarian dimension, but we do not accept it in the political aspect, and therefore the Palestinian resistance will continue to fight against the enemy that seeks to achieve a victory in Gaza after the defeat it suffered on October 7 at the hands of Palestinian fighters, but it will not be able to reach any achievement that will erase this victory of the resistance and our people.
The Palestinian resistance fighters, for their part, have not ceased to respond to the Israeli bombardment and to confront the occupying troops. The resistance fighters, although committed to abide by the truce for the benefit of the peoples of Gaza, assure that their fingers will remain on the triggers and their battalions will remain on the lookout.
And let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Panama, dozens of people remain in vigil on early Friday morning in front of the building of the Supreme Court of Justice on a day where the High Court starts a permanent session to sort out the claims of unconstitutionality of the Mining Law 406. On Friday, Panamanians are expecting the sentence of the unconstitutionality of Law 406 request, by which the executive made the concession of the Donoso mine to the First Quantum multinational for a 20-year term. Over 100 people from different organizations have been waiting in front of the foremost court in Panama since November 13th. A country that has been paralyzed for over a month due to the massive and continuous riots and blockades that have been replicated across the country against the mining in Panama. Venezuela is on its way to develop its 7th consultative referendum in 25 years since the inauguration of President Hugo Chavez and the 30th electoral event. Let's take a look at the details.
Nations of the Venezuelan society gathered at the headquarters of the National Electoral Council to give their support to the referendum for the Essequibo. They make up unions, political parties, and groups of different affiliations, such as these rockers and these public officials who share songs about the Essequibo.
We are being consulted, as every organized community is, from business people, government, and opposition parties, to artists, movements, and people's power, to decide on the actions to resolve our most important border issue, our Guyana Essequibo.
The activists refer to a legal mechanism that, despite its constitutionality, was protested by Guyana before the Court of Justice of The Hague to prevent its realization.
For more than 130 years, during which Venezuelan men and women have been persistently and perseveringly fighting for our territory of the Guyana Essequibo, there has never ever been a national consultation for the popular vote to decide the vital issues of the struggle for the recovery of the Guyana Essequibo.
Opposition spokespersons agree with the Consultative Republic of Guyana on criticizing the referendum under the argument that sovereignty is not consulted. This is a stance confronted by other opponents who, putting aside their differences with the government, will take part in the referendum.
And why would somebody be so much bothered with asking Venezuelans if they agree or not to defend their territory? Why would somebody be so much bothered by that? I'm always suspicious of those who say that the consultation is no good. I always find it suspicious, because they are the same ones who called for abstention.
We need to understand that there is a difference between the government and the state. The interest in the Essequibo is not of one government, it is the republic's. The republic is defended by the state, and the state is led by whoever has the leadership, in this case the presidency of the republic.
This referendum will be the 7th since 1999, when the first one was convened for the call to a constituent assembly. It was followed by the referendum for the approval of the 1999 Constitution, then a union referendum in the 2000. In 2004, the opposition called for a recall referendum against the President Chavez. In 2007, the referendum to reform the Constitution, and in 2009, the referendum to approve the constitutional amendment.
We are in the time of the Bolivarian Revolution of Venezuela. And the Bolivarian Revolution has a mechanism for consulting the people, which is the participative, protagonist, and decisive democracy. That is why we have had more than 29 electoral processes and more than 7 consultative processes.
One of the political rights expressly included in the Constitution are referendums as a form of participation, and one of them, provided for in an Article 71, is precisely the consultative referendum. The consultative referendum, which is a figure that allows the nation to make fundamental decisions, is born from the concept of sovereignty. That is to say, that the power resides in the people.
With this process, there will be 30 elections in which the Venezuelan people have taken part in the last 25 years. This one seeks to ratify the current popular will on a centennial issue. Gladys Quesada, TeleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
In Argentina, mothers of Plaza de Mayo march as they have been doing since every Thursday since the last military dictatorship in the 70s at Mayo Square in Buenos Aires. Only this time they sent a clear message against the government program of President-elect Javier Milei. The mothers who first began marching in their search for those who were disappeared during the last civic military dictatorship in their first mobilization against the president-elect invited Argentines to oppose those adjustment policies that the far-right Javier Milei wants to implement. In the days after being elected, Milei announced a sharp cut in public spending through the closure of ministries and privatization of public companies. During the demonstration, the mothers marched holding signs with the slogan, "No to the payment of the foreign debt." And we go now to Ireland, where the stabbing of 4 people, 3 of them minors, has triggered disorder in the streets of the Irish capital. The rally quickly turned into attacks against the Irish police and acts of vandalism such as setting fire up to police cars, buses and streetcars. The protest led to the closure of several streets in Dublin until 10 p.m., when the police managed to regain control. Irish President Michael Higgins expressed his concern for the victims of the horrific multiple stabbings while complimenting the Irish police for their work in containing the disturbances. And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. The leader of Niger's ruling military junta National Council, General Omar Tiani, met on Thursday with his counterparts from Mali and Burkina Faso in his first international visit since he took the presidency in July. Niger's neighboring countries, Mali and Burkina Faso, ruled by military leaders who who took powers in 2020 and 2022 respectively, have promised solidarity with the coup leaders of Niger. After a brief visit to Mali, Tiani arrived in Burkina Faso on Thursday afternoon for a friendship and working visit with Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The two leaders discussed issues common to both countries, in particular the fight against terrorism and socio-economic development, according to a statement from the presidency of Burkina Faso. And on Thursday, the Kenyan authorities privatized 35 state-owned companies and are considering opening the capital of another 100. The Kenyan economy, the locomotive of East Africa, has been seriously shaken by COVID, followed the shockwaves of the war in Ukraine and a historic drought in the Horn of Africa. Public debt in the country is of some 53 million people, stood at more than 10,100 billion shillings, around 64.4 billion euros, at the end of June, according to Treasury figures, representing around two-thirds of gross domestic product. The Kenyan head of state told investors that they had identified the first 35 companies that they were going to offer to the private sector and that they were looking at about 100 others. On Wednesday, Liberia's new president, Joseph Boakai, called for unity and support. Boakai, a veteran of Liberian politics, won on Monday with 50.64% of the vote, compared to the 49.36% of his opponent, George Weah, the former soccer star and current president. The new president promised to extend development to the whole country, in particular by building roads in the southeastern region, abandoned for years. As during his campaign, Boakai reiterated that the fight against corruption would be one of his priorities and indicated that in upcoming days he would put in place a plan for a calm and peaceful transition. He also indicated that he would carry out radical reforms of the security and justice system and ensure respect for the rule of law. And the Democratic Republic of Congo launched a month-long election campaign on Sunday, with 25 candidates running for president amid a tense political climate and relentless fighting in the east of the country. With just a few weeks to go before the presidential election in Democratic Republic of Congo, Denis Mukwege, Martin Fayulu, Theodore Ngoy, and other candidates announced they will refer the Independent National Electoral Commission to the Constitutional Court for failing to fulfill its constitutional mission of ensuring the regularity of the electoral process. Around 44 million registered voters out of the population of almost 100 million are set to elect a president on December 20th. They will also choose between tens of thousands of candidates for legislatives and local bodies in the country with very vast natural resources but endemic conflict and corruption.
As you know, 80% of voters' cards are illegible because they were printed on thermal paper. So voters were deliberately given illegible cards with a print that gets erased. How do you vote? How can you find a card? Basically, we are saying that we as presidential candidates and others who have signed the decision with us, a copy of which we are about to give you, don't know who our voters are. So we are going to the elections without knowing the real numbers of voters.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscast and contribute to provide an alternative news source of the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories at our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.